All right, friends. Salam
Assalamu
alaikum.
alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Salam alaikum and welcome. Welcome, welcome, friends. It is wonderful and beautiful to see all of your beautiful faces as you're coming in and getting settled in. Take just a moment to see all the beautiful friends who have gathered. And I'm mindful of the fact that some of us are joining for the first time. And if that's the case, then a special welcome to all of you and all of us. Let me ask, as you come in and get settled in, that you take a moment to mute your microphone, just so we can cut down on some of the feedback. And if you are in a position to do so, do keep your video on. There is a barakah to see each other's faces, to be able to make eye contact with friends. And if you are in a place where that's not really an option, and that's also very much understood. Yes. Well, I'm taking a moment just to scroll across the screen and make eye contact with all of you beautiful people. Some of your faces I recognize from journeys past and recent, in some cases very, very recent. And in some cases, you are much more new to me. And in that case, it's a joy to get to see dear old friends for the first time. If this is the first time that you're joining us, let me share with you a little bit about how we tend to do these monthly live gatherings. It's essentially an attempt to give us a sense of community at a time where so many of us are scattered across this beautiful third rock from the sun, the only home that we seem to have found in all of these infinite galaxies to live in. And what a beautiful mystery it is that sometimes we can feel more connected to someone who shares a path with us, though they might live thousands and thousands of kilometers away. And at the same time, how often it is the case that many of us may not even know the name of someone who lives just a few doors down from us. Sometimes you might even feel that the people who live under the roof with you are a bit of a mystery to you, that you have spent years of life living with them, and there's something quite mysterious that remains about them and about you to them, perhaps. So in these sessions, the way that we try to enjoy this company is simply this. We welcome each other. We offer greetings of salam, of peace, a sense of wholeness, which is our aspiration. I ask you to take a minute to make sure that your microphones are muted. That's to help us with the quality of the sound recording for some friends who might wish to listen in later.
We are muted.
Alhamdulillah. And take, if you have a cup of chai, of your halal beverage of choice, feel free to hold that in your hands and let it warm up your fingers. We call these sessions chai, love, and prayer. And we begin with chai because that's in some ways the most tangible of them. It's the place where love enters you in a bodily format. Then comes love, which you know when you experience it, and without which life is lacking so much of meaning and joy, and prayer. Prayer, something that connects us to heaven. It reminds us of our celestial origin, of the fact that we come from a perfect source and we're bound for a perfect goal. We begin these sessions always with some sacred music, and we will do so again today. I'll try to make sure that the music that is chosen is one that is apropos of our gathering. I then share with you some sacred teachings which come from the heart of the Islamic tradition. There might be a meditation on the Qur'an, on an aspect of the chosen one, the Blessed Prophet, or some of the wisdom of the great Sufi sages like Rumi and Ibn Arabi. Then comes the part that initially many of you were terrified about. And now you've come to wait for it and thirst for it and long for it, which is a chance to be in a small group fellowship with old friends and new friends, and to find that mystery of what happens when we are in communion with one another. And then we usually end with either a small, short practice or something to take away until our next gathering. But Bismillah, let us go ahead and start with our sacred music and with a remembrance, with a reminder that for us in this beautiful tradition, music is not simply banging on a drum. It is not the plucking of an instrument. That music for us is sustenance for the soul. It's a wonderful reminder that according to the Quran, our very first experience of God was hearing the voice of God, hearing that sweet melodic invitation of Alastu Barabbikum, am I not your cherishing, sustaining Lord? In the wisdom of the Islamic tradition, music, when it's real, when it's sacred, is inherently celestial. It's something heavenly. And we're even taught that real music is the sound of the movement of the heavenly spheres. That's why music, even when it's in a language that you don't speak yet on earth, has the potential to transport you, to carry you into a different state, into a different realm. I somewhat jokingly had thought about calling this session Baby, Baby, Baby. And then it seemed like perhaps that was lacking the gravity of these celestial beings that we wish to welcome into our own hearts today. But indeed, we are going to be talking about three babies. Baby Moses, baby Isa, Jesus, and a baby Muhammad. In some cases, all of them before they have been recognized as the great prophets and messengers that they are to become. And we cannot speak about babies without speaking about their mothers. So today's session is in many ways an honoring of the mothers of the prophets. Sacred women who are sacred in some ways, not just because they're associated with these male figures, but that they are sacred in and by themselves. In some ways, from the perspective of the Quran, it's actually the babies who come to be associated with these sacred women. And we will talk a little bit about the significance and the prominence that they have in the Quranic text and in the Sufi tradition. I know that for many of us, we also come to this gathering with a very heavy heart over the devastation and onslaught that is taking place in Palestine right now. It is, even by the standards of our own violent last century or so, it's a level of destruction that we have not seen very often. And one of the reasons that it fills so many of us with a sense of devastation, of grief, of a brokenheartedness, and in fact, of what Rabbi Heschel, probably the most distinguished ethical and moral voice of the Jewish faith, calls a sense of righteous indignation. That sense of anger, which is not about the ego, but about a sense of when you know that you're witnessing something that is wrong, when you know that you're seeing innocent souls being wronged, and you know that unless you do something, then rocks are going to cry out. And may it be that in this very dark period of our human community, that each one of us can be a small channel of light, a vessel of light to uplift the voices of those who are hurting, to cut through the nonsense, and to refuse to settle for sound bites and rehearsed and polished lies, and acknowledge the humanity of all of us, starting with the places where the grief is the greatest. It's a reminder, as the Blessed Prophet says, alayhi salatu wassalam, that the life of every single human being is more sacred than the Kaaba, more sacred than the house of God. That's how sacred humanity is. So we're also coming right out of the Christmas season for most of our Christian friends in the Western tradition. Our Orthodox friends are still waiting another week or so, many of them. And we've done this amazing magic trick. We've taken this first century Palestinian Jew named Jesus, the son of Mary, and we have managed somehow mysteriously to take him out of Palestine and put him in this snowy place, which looks more like England or Netherlands. And we've also somehow managed to avoid dealing with the fact that he and his mother, peace be upon both of them, were in fact, wait for it, Jewish. So Jesus, the son of Mary, and his blessed mother end up looking more like English white people living in a Dutch or an English countryside place, which gets a lot of snow. It doesn't snow very much in historic Palestine. To help us remember the birth of Moses, the birth of Jesus, and the birth of Muhammad, peace be upon them, I want us to begin through that oral dimension of what the sound of the languages that Jesus spoke, that Mary spoke, sounded like. So we're going to begin, with your permission, with Aramaic, a wonderful sound that was spoken by Jesus and his community. So Bismillah, we'll listen to about 2 minutes of this. We could do worse than just spend the rest of our gathering listening to that magnificent Aramaic chant, the one that moved the Pope to tears upon hearing it. Occasionally, when you read the works of mainstream Islamic theology, you hear an account that prophethood is something that was restricted to men. And that's oftentimes the majoritarian view that continues right down to our own age. Why should that be? I've not given a lot of reason and justification for it, but that has not been the only opinion. In fact, there have also been other schools of thought, the Zahiri school of thought, which flourished in Spain, which would say that Hazrat Maryam, Mary, Jesus's mother, was also a prophet. After all, does she not speak with God? And does not God speak directly with her? And in fact, when we dig just a little bit deeper, we find that things get even more interesting. In that same place that is today, and for the last 85 days, in fact, 85 days and 75 years, has been in the news so much, Gaza. There's a small town called Asqalan or Ashkelon in modern Hebrew. And the most important commentary that was ever composed on the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad is a book called Fathul Bari Bisharh Sahih al-Bukhari, written by Abul Fath al-Asqalani. He was from Asqalan in Gaza. And in it, he narrates a statement from the Blessed Prophet, alayhi salatu wassalam, in which the Prophet identifies 6 female prophets. It doesn't mean that there's not more than that. It just means that these are 6 that he names, and they include Hazrat Hawa, Eve, Sarah, the wife of Ibrahim, Hajar, Hagar, also the wife of Ibrahim, the mother of Moses, whom we'll talk about, Hazrat Asya, who raises Moses, and Hazrat Maryam. This is oftentimes what we tend to find in our spiritual traditions. You have these extraordinary spiritual statements, these gems, and when you discover them, you feel like, where has this been all my life? How come we're not taught these kinds of teachings? They've been there all along, but usually buried under a lot of misogyny and patriarchy, perhaps. I'll put the name of the book in the chat. It is the Sharh, the commentary on the Hadith collection of Bukhari, written by Abul Fath al-Asqalani. I'll type it up in a second. And in fact, aside from the fact that the adolescent in me enjoys having a talk, which could have been called Baby, 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 there is a deep connection between and among these babies. Baby Musa, Baby Isa, and Baby Muhammad. The Habib, the beloved, God's own beloved, the chosen one, the Prophet Muhammad, says at one point, when describing his connection, his relationship to Christ, he says, I am the closest of humanity to Jesus, the son of Mary, in this world and in the world to come. All of the prophets are like sisters and brothers. They're like sisters and brothers who share the same father, but they have different mothers. They're half siblings. That's the reason why when you look at all of them, you can tell that they have something in common, but each of them also has got their own cuteness going on. They got their own light going on. They speak to a different culture. They use different symbols and languages in the same way that half siblings could. So I think Katerina is right. We could have definitely called this Mama, Mama, Mama just as well. And so let's talk about mothers for just a second as well before we get into the specifics of these three birth narratives. There's a beautiful narration in which the Prophet says that when Allah created the heavens and the earth, God brought the whole of loving mercy. So this is this word rahma, a mercy in full like the womb, a mercy that wraps around you like the womb, that your relationship to Allah is not with some distant creator who created you and stepped back, but it's really like the relationship between an unborn child and her mother. You are directly dependent on God and directly maintained and sustained through this cosmic umbilical cord of existence. That God brings the fullness of mercy into the world, and that mercy is divided into 100 parts, 99 of which God reserves for himself, herself. And one part is given to creation. And the Prophet says, the place that you feel this most intensely is the love that mothers have for their children, and so do birds. If you ever see a bird going and picking up some food and coming back and out of its own mouth feeding its little chicks, that direct sense of love and the direct love of mothers is something that the Prophet says is connected to the love that Allah has for humanity. So let's take a look at Mama, 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 as we were told, by taking a look at the lives of these three figures. Bismillah. And we start with a little reminder that historically speaking, we had genres of books called Qisasul Anbiya, Tales of the Prophets, that included the stories of all the prophets, starting with Adam and Eve and moving on through to the Prophet Muhammad. The prophets were literally part of one book. And sometimes these books would be illustrated. So here you see on the right-hand side that powerful image of Moses's mother trusting the baby who is not yet God's great messenger and prophet Musa, but is just simply her child, Moses, and trusting him to the river, and the river would carry under God's watchful eye Moses to the palace of the Pharaoh, where his own wife, Asya, would recover and raise Moses. In the Quran, we get a couple of accounts of this mother whom the Prophet, remember, names as a prophet in her own right. إِذْ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَىٰ أُمِّكَ مَا يُوحَىٰ. We sent the wahi, the revelation, to your mama, and we revealed to her what we revealed. And these Quran commentators and Quran translators have to do a lot of gymnastics. So they don't want to say that we sent a revelation to her. So they say we inspired. But that word, wahy, that's the same word that is used for revelation. You could be perfectly justified if you translate this as we revealed to her. And what is it that she has revealed to her? Take your child, put him in the chest, in the tabut, place him in the river, let the river wash him onto its bank, and he will be carried, taken in by an enemy of mine. And then here's the important part. وَالْقَيْتُ عَلَيْكَ مَحَبَّةً مِّنِّي وَلِتُصْنَعَ عَلَى عَيْنِي. And I will shower you with a love from me and fashion you under my watchful eye. We have a whole online course, The Heart of the Qur'an, and there's a whole hour-long discussion on this verse there. One of the themes that we talk about there is this notion that in the Qur'an, the pronoun for God keeps shifting from I to you to third person. But whenever God speaks in the first person singular, those are the most intimately loving verses of the Quran. That's not the royal we. This is the intimate me, voice of God. I will shower you with a mahabba, with a love from me, minni, from me, and I will fashion you according to my glance, to be shaped and formed in the image of God, in the glance of God, through the eyes of God. And of course, the whole goal of the spiritual path in Islam, what we call ihsan, what is the definition of ihsan and that the Habib, the chosen one, gives? It's to adore God, to worship God as if you see God. And if you don't, to remember that God nevertheless sees you. It's that shift, what in our Anayati tradition we call the antipodal moment, where you rise above looking at this world through this egoic perspective, and instead you experience yourself being seen by God in the glance of the divine. And in the Christian mystical tradition, people like Meister Eckhart have been telling us the eye through which you see God is the same eye through which God sees you. So this intimate moment of Moses' mother, in that moment of agony, of worry, what's going to happen to my baby? And God reaching out to her, assuring her that he will be showered with love, raised even in the house of the enemy, and he'll be fashioned according to God's glance. And God goes on to say, again, we revealed to Musa, to the mother of Moses, nurse him, suckle him, right? God isn't just concerned with what you have to do and what you have to believe. Intimate bodily functions, like the nursing of a child, is a matter of urgent divine concern. Wala takhafi, don't worry, don't fear, don't sorrow, do not grieve. Inna raduhu ilayka, and I will return him to you, and I'll make him one of the messengers. Yeah. So this deep concern that God has for this mother, who herself is said to also be a prophet, for her baby, who will someday be a prophet. That's the first of our stories. The second of our stories is Hazrat Maryam, Mary. One beautiful thing about the Islamic miniatures is that they actually portray her in a Palestinian landscape. You've got the appropriate kind of trees, there. This looks like something in the Near East or the Middle East, as opposed to, I don't know, Amsterdam. وَإِذْ قَالَتِ الْمَلَائِكَةُ يَا مَرْيَمْ. And remember when the angel said, "Oh, Maryam, إِنَّ اللَّهَ اسْتَفَاكِ وَطَهَّرَكِ وَاسْتَفَاكِ عَلَى نِسَاءِ الْعَالَمِينَ." Oh, Mary, God has chosen you and purified you above the women of all the worlds, chosen you above women of all the worlds. And it's worth pointing out here that Mary herself, as we talked about, is acknowledged as being a prophet in her own right in a number of schools in Islam. And that the verb that is chosen for her, istafaki, that is from the same root as the most distinguished honorific of our blessed prophet, Mustafa. Mustafa and istafaki come from the same root. So in other words, Mary is being praised in exactly the same way that Muhammad Mustafa, our prophet, is. It's an indication of the extraordinary high rank that Mary would have and continues to have. In fact, when the prophet lists the most celestial of all women, he names Mary, his own wife Khadija, and Asiya amongst them. When she is worshipping in the mihrab, in the prayer niche of the temple, Zechariah comes to visit her, and there he finds her with rizq, with sustenance that is mysteriously showing up every day. And he asks her, "How is it that you have these?" And she says, "Huwa min indallah, inna Allah yarzuqu man yasha bighayri hisab." This is from God, and God gives the daily bread. God gives sustenance, inner sustenance, bodily sustenance, in any way that God wishes. And the place in the mosque, in the temple, in the church, in the holy site where Mary is worshiping, is the prayer niche, is the mihrab. Nowadays, unfortunately, we've got a lot of mosques in the world where women are relegated to the basement, to the back, behind a barrier. But Mary is in the Holy of Holies. Mary is in the mihrab. Mary is in the prayer niche. Mary is in the most sacred of places. Nobody puts mama in the back. It's worth pausing and reflecting on some of these symbolisms that we have. To come back again to that Palestinian landscape, many of you might have seen that due to the immense suffering in Gaza, not only the 21,000 people killed, 10,000 children, but a situation of over 2 million human beings, Palestinians, being displaced, driven from their home, ethnically cleansed. That the city of Bethlehem, that you know from all those great Christmas songs, canceled Christmas. They said that the suffering is too great for us to have a Christmas celebration this year. Christmas is literally canceled in the land of Jesus. Yeah. If you're coming in, let me just ask you, please, to make sure that your microphones are on mute. Thank you, friends. So here's a depiction of Jesus and Mary and Joseph through the work of a Palestinian Christian artist, Suleiman Mansour, depicting them in that rather brown hue that, according to the Bible, they actually had. Uh, Jesus didn't look like Thor. Jesus wasn't Scandinavian, didn't have limp blonde hair, wasn't freckle faced and blue eyed. He was a brown skinned, curly haired, first century Palestinian Jew. And if you want to get a sense of how this maternal presence has been one that has actually served to unite us, to unify us, one of the places that we can look is in sacred sites such as the Hagia Sophia, the Hagia Sophia, where for a few centuries after the Muslims had converted the largest church in the world into a mosque, above the mihrab, that same mihrab that Mary is said to have prayed in, above the mihrab, there was an icon of the Virgin and Child. And they kept that there. For centuries, we as Muslims saw no contradiction between praying towards Mecca under the icon of the Virgin and Child. That has been also a beautiful part of our tradition. And the great Rumi. So here's a miniature on the right from an Iranian, contemporary Iranian miniature artist showing the birth of Jesus through Mary. And there's a reminder that we get in Rumi's poetry, which talks about how the relationship between Mary and Jesus is as intimate as the relationship between the spirit and the body. In the Western tradition, we're sort of accustomed to a notion that the spirit is elevated and the body is somehow debased. But remember that in the Islamic tradition, Rumi says the spirit is not separate from the body and the body is not separate from the spirit. These two mingle. And so Mawlana Rumi, in his beautiful book, Fihi Ma Fihi, in it is what's in it, he offers this analogy that the birth of the spirit in each one of us is a little bit like the birth that Mary had to go through in the Qur'an. She retreats to an eastern place under a tree, and the agony of childbirth is so great that at one point she says, I wish I had never been. I wish that I was a forgotten being. But she endures, and through that pain, Christ is born. Jesus is born, the Spirit of God, the Messiah, a sign of God. And Rumi says the birth of the Spirit in each one of us is like this. We've got to be willing to endure some suffering on the path of love in the same way that Mary endured. And that if halfway on the path we turn away from the suffering, from the polishing of the heart, from the coming to term with the pain, then instead of giving birth to our own spirit, that Jesus, that spirit will return back to its source, and we will be left deprived. So the birth experience of Mary becomes the very model of the spiritual life. And in a ghazal, in a love song, he says, Kis darin shahr ke oo mast neest. Who is it in this whole city who's not intoxicated? Who is it that is not like Mary, pregnant with the Holy Spirit? Yeah. So the spiritual seeker in all of us becomes a Mary, a Maryam. That brings us to the third mama, the birth of the Prophet Muhammad through his blessed mother, Amina. Muslim sources loved to depict the birth of the Prophet as an event of cosmic significance. We're told that when Amina was pregnant with baby Muhammad, not quite yet the messenger of Allah, that wouldn't happen for 40 more years. Baby Muhammad, that she would experience a light shining forth from her belly. And said that sometimes that light would shine all the way to Syria and Palestine. You kind of see angelic beings being depicted as bringing the baby and offering the baby to Amina. There's a point in which the Prophet is asked about his own reality. And this is what he says. He says, I'll tell you, I'll inform you about it. I am the prayer of my father Ibrahim. I am what Ibrahim prayed for. I am the gospel of Jesus. I am the evangel. I am the good news that Jesus brought. And I am the vision that my mother has seen. I am the vision of my mother. All mothers of the prophets see such visions. So let's go back over it. I am the prayer of Ibrahim. I am what Ibrahim, my father, prayed for. I am the good news of Jesus. And I am the vision of my mother. All mothers of the prophets have these visions. There's an intimate connection between each of the prophets and their mothers. And in the Turkish tradition, there's a beautiful practice of having the birth of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, be something that's honored and celebrated. This is called the Mevlut, which is the Turkish version of Mawlid or Milad. And if you've ever been searching for a woman-centered account of sacred history, look no further. According to this account, when Hazrat Amina is going into labor, she is visited by Maryam, she is visited by Asiya, she is visited by angels, and she's visited by the Huris of paradise, the chaste and beautiful maidens of paradise. And they have a women's gathering in which they sing songs to her. Welcoming, marhaba is the refrain, marhaba, welcoming the birth of the Prophet. And to this day, whenever Turks, and in particular Turkish women, want to have a significant gathering, the Mevlut, the birth of the Prophet poem, is recited. It's not just recited once a year, it's recited anytime that people wish to have a women's gathering. And there's a tender moment in which women reach over and touch each other on the shoulder, that bodily offering of joy and celebration. It used to be that when people would go to the city of Mecca, that the house in which the chosen one, the blessed prophet, was born, was also a site of pilgrimage. We have sources going back to the 3rd century of Islam, talking about how when people would go on Hajj and on Umrah, they would go to pay their respects to the birth house of the Prophet. And in the month in which he would be born, we were told that every religious scholar, every Sufi, every child, woman, and man in town would gather in the birth house of the Prophet. And in union, they would walk together from the birth house of the Prophet to the Kaaba, singing songs and offering dhikrs and distributing sweets. We were just in Mecca 2 weeks ago, and this is the gathering from our group there. And there's a few of our friends gathered here today who are in this photo. The yellow building behind us is today a library. That original house of the Prophet, as is the case with so many other sacred sites in Mecca and Medina, has been torn down, but the foundations have been preserved. And I jokingly tell our group that our Saudi friends make it quite easy to identify where this house is because there's a neon ticker tape that used to go around the building saying, this is definitely not the house of the Prophet's birth. This is definitely not where he was born. There is absolutely no blessing to visiting this place. And so you think, well, all right, then I think I'm in the right place, inshallah. And there's guards who come, and their job is to tell us to move back and move back. So we move back. But the location of this house, which is just a few minutes walking away from the Kaaba, is where all pilgrims used to come and continue to come. I do recommend to friends, if you're interested, to watch a movie. It's also available in a dubbed English translation with subtitles called Muhammad, the Messenger of God. It's an Iranian film. You can find it on YouTube. It's supposed to be a trilogy. And the first part, which is the only one that's been made so far, really centers on the birth and the childhood of the Prophet. And what is so fascinating is if you compare this movie with the 1970s Hollywood film that was made for the Prophet called The Message, features Anthony Quinn, amongst others. And that movie makes an understandable choice of not depicting the Prophet, not depicting the family of the Prophet, and not depicting any of the closest companions of the Prophet. As a result, the main two stars of the film, The Message, the Hollywood epic, end up being the Prophet's uncle, Hamza, and Bilal, the Abyssinian Muazzin. The Iranians, as has tended to be the case with the Turks and Indians and Pakistanis and Central Asians historically, haven't had the same qualms about depicting the Prophet. So in this Iranian film, there is an actress that plays Hazrat Amina, a very beautiful woman that you see holding the Prophet here. And so the main two stars of this movie are Hazrat Amina and Hazrat Halima, the Prophet's milk nurse. And it's a completely different experience of the Prophet when women's lives are put at the center. In fact, the shrine of Hazrat Amina itself used to be a pilgrimage site. It's in a small mountainous place called Al-Abwa, about 2 hours between Mecca and Medina. And you know you're there because every time you go, there's people who have placed roses on this mama's gravesite. And there are plans now to rebuild the shrine that used to be here as well. So these are just some of the kinds of experiences that we try to recreate when friends come with us to Mecca and Medina. All right, friends. With your permission, I think that's probably enough talking on my part. What we're going to do now is I'm going to open up the breakout rooms. Don't run away. You will be just fine. It will be okay. I promise you. And what we're going to do is we're going to have an occasion for you to share some time of fellowship with your friends. This fellowship has got a couple of best practices that we have found serve us well. So this is a time for us to be in community with each other. It is not a time for any one of us to fulfill our guru fantasies. No one is the guru. No one is the healer. No one is the sage. We are just friends accompanying one another. That's it. So what we want to do is you want to take a couple of minutes and to talk about some of the teachings that we have tried to share together here. If you notice that someone is just going on and on and on, after a couple of minutes, feel free in the most gentle way possible to just say, thank you. Thank you. And then have the next person have an opportunity to speak. And then we'll take about 15 minutes or so. And then we'll come back together. We'll listen to some of the reflections that you all have had and compare some notes. And we'll go from there. Inshallah, this will be a sweet and enjoyable experience for you. Anyway, I've opened up the rooms and I'll see you, inshallah, back in 15 minutes. I think you can each choose the room that has somewhat randomly been assigned to you. I'm Trout. I think I see your hand up here.
Hello. Um, yes, I was very moved by your teaching about the sacred feminine, and I would love to find out more. Any books you could maybe suggest, or any other courses you run around that topic, because it's been so suppressed by patriarchy that I feel lost, almost thinking, well, what have we been portrayed by, even by in Christianity? It's all patriarchic. The Bible was written by men, about men, for men, interpreted by men, and I would like to see the other side more.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for that. I'll share something with you that there's maybe about 15 or so friends here who just came back from the beautiful journey that we had in Mecca and Medina. And on one of the last nights when we were sharing our experiences, one of them said that they so appreciated feeling like they had gone on the maternal version of the Mecca and Medina program. And I was very honored and very delighted to hear that. But to be honest with you, also a bit surprised because I'd never thought about it as going out of the way to emphasize the feminine and the maternal. It just is. And actually, what is unnatural, what is imbalanced, what is out of whack, what is not harmonious is when we're presented something which is only and exclusively through the lens of not only men, but also the masculine. And there are some works out there. There's a few good books on Sufi women. Rukia Cornell has one. Camille Helminski has one. Javad Nurbakhsh has one. And those are important. I think recovering the voices, presences, beings of women is indispensable. Indispensable. Alongside that, there's also a way in which that whole dimension of what you could call the feminine, the qualities of love, mercy, beauty, that when those are seen as optional, accidental, decoration, the cherry on top, instead of really being at the very heart of things. And so I think, just a couple of ways of remembering how essential this aspect of things is. Remember that in the Qur'an, Mecca is called Ummul Qura, the mother of villages. There's something maternal about Mecca. And that the Habib, the blessed prophet, the chosen one, he is Nabi al-Ummi, the maternal prophet, the one who loves you more than your mama. And in modern Muslim languages, that term gets translated simply as the unlettered prophet. But Sufis have always known that Ummi is someone that has to do with the with the mama, with the mother. And so that's why there's also that notion of asking to be nursed directly from the prophet, to have that kind of an intimate connection with him. So yeah, I mean, I'll be happy to share some books, but to be honest, my friend, a lot of this is we're having to piece together things from a lot of different teachings kind of here and there. And inshallah, they'll continue to be an offering. Lama, I see your hand up, dear.
Thank you. Thank you also for saying my name correctly. That's so rare.
Alhamdulillah.
I'm just a bit confused about, so the idea of God, like we're in the womb of his mercy, and that idea of divine love and that feminine aspect, where does the majestic or like the masculine qualities fit into that? Are they like separate? Are they half and half? Or I just am a bit confused conceptually.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I will confess that, I'm also not always entirely comfortable using the language of the masculine and the feminine, because after all, if our understanding of the masculine is something that excludes beauty and love and mercy, then I don't know what kind of a monstrous thing we're left with, sort of over there. I hope that if we're going to use the language of masculine and feminine, we have not so much a binary of like the line that divides the circle, but really much more of an interpenetrating yin and yang notion. The language that we've tended to use in the Islamic tradition is more Jamali and Jalali qualities. Jamali would be all of those qualities that have to do more with beauty, love, mercy. And Jalal would be majesty, awe, glory. And these have a vague relationship to the masculine and the feminine, but not 100% falling onto those categories either. Remember that the most beautiful creature that Allah has ever created, according to the Prophet, is Yusuf, Joseph. And he's definitely a man hot enough for women to forget what they're chopping. And there's certain women, Ibn Arabi's first Sufi teacher, and he says that she was so Jalali that he couldn't bring himself to look into her eyes. So I think we want to avoid that, but these are also old archetypes, and some of us are very attached to the language of the masculine and feminine. What I would say is, if it's helpful, think about the language of transcendence and immanence, tanzih and tashbih, and that if you have a God who's only transcendent, well, then you end up with the God beyond the clouds, a God who's so majestic that it's actually not knowable. But if God is only immanent, even though for the Sufis, the immanence of God has a certain priority, but if God is only immanent, then you end up with a buddy. You don't end up with God. There has to also be something awesome, majestic about God as well. So, masculine and feminine, these are our terminologies. These are earthly realities. Rumi says at one point, the spirit has nothing to do with the masculine and the feminine. But in this realm that we live, then we want to make sure that we're not perpetuating a notion of binaries that excludes one or the other. I don't know. Is that helpful?
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Alhamdulillah. Tanya Jan, salam alaikum, my dear. Good to see you.
Salam, Ami Jan, and salam, dear friends. It's such a privilege to be in this space, and I love Lama's question so much. And I so loved your explanation because it's so true. We see everything from the human lens, and we simplify the world in binaries just to make it more digestible for us, to understand and comprehend the complexity within which we exist. But in truth, each one of us has both masculine and feminine traits, characteristics within us. there is Jalal and there is Jamal in each human being as well. And I love just sort of trying to remove myself from that thought process of just identifying with masculine and feminine and seeing this more as a more unified concept and idea. So I just wanted to add to that. And I just love the question and I love what you shared about it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much. You know, a lot of our Sufi friends, they love to mess with our preconceived notions and to invert them to sort of help us realize how arbitrary they are. This doesn't surprise you that for 2,000 years before Freud, there has been a notion that has looked at the masculine as active and the feminine as receptive. And some great, and you can understand, of course, all of the problematics of that kind of a notion. But someone like Ibn Arabi comes to flip it. And he says, fine, if you wish to look at the masculine as active and the feminine as receptive, then this whole entire universe is feminine because all of us are receptive towards God, and God is the only active agent. So none of you all, theologians, are actually masculine, right? So it's the kind of very playful language where they stop speaking theologically, they stop speaking in that logical, discursive language, and they want to play a different game. They want to sing a different song, which I think is also a liberatory place. All right, friends. So we have a semi-official promise that we make to each other that we try not to go for much more than an hour and a half. Of course, one could linger in such sweet gatherings, but it's also good to honor each other's time. And so what I want to do is I want to take two last points to be shared and mentioned here. One of them is about the programs that inshallah, we will have coming up. So this session, you know, we had made available for anybody who wanted to join. The next one will inshallah be January 20th of the new year, new Christian year, at 2 p.m. Eastern time again. So mark that one in your calendar. I wanted to share with you some of the programs that we will have coming up. So we just returned from the Umrah program. The next one is in about a year, again, December of 24. But there's three other programs in the meantime, actually. The first one is Morocco in April. If you are available, interested in joining us, that's from April 13th to the 22nd. And it'll include Marrakesh and Fez with an overnight in the desert, emphasizing the Moroccan Sufi tradition and Ibn Arabi. Then soon after that, April 26th to the 30th, we'll have our first Andalusia program, a retreat in Spain, in the beautiful site that you see here. We've been trying to come up with options that are more affordable for our friends, and this one is that. It's a Friday to a Tuesday program, and the cost covers your stay there, all the teachings, and all meals. And the Morocco program, the proceeds from that will donate a portion to the earthquake relief efforts in Morocco. The Spain program, we will donate to Palestine. And we will do the same with Turkey. That will be, inshallah, in June 5th to June 16th. So we'll also make a significant donation, inshallah, from the Turkey program to Palestinian humanitarian efforts through UNRWA and Palestine Children Relief Effort. And then the last part is that some of the kind of teachings that I've been sharing here, they are available online through the online courses that we have, part of the Qur'an and the Rumi course. And for the foreseeable future, we're going to donate 50% of all the proceeds to Palestinian humanitarian efforts. It's the very, very least that we can do to ease the suffering of humanity. And then we had mentioned also about wanting to leave you with a practice. So I'll make sure I type this correctly. Yeah. So here's the verse of the Quran that I would encourage you to take to heart, to repeat, and to meditate on. وَالْقَيْتُ عَلَيْكَ مَحَبَّةً مِنِّي, which is, I shall cast upon you love from me. I shall cast upon you love from me. And what I would encourage you to do is, yes, by all means, repeat the Arabic of these lines over the course of the day. وَالْقَيْتُ عَلَيْكَ مَحَبَّةً مِنِّي. And even more than that, allow yourself to be washed over by the divine eye. Experience yourself in a shower of loving divine glances. See what it would feel like, not just to look out into the world, but rather experience yourself being seen by the all-seer. Just as the sun shines equally upon trees and rocks and fish and birds and us, to experience that divine, benevolent, loving glance that falls on a baby Moses and his mother, on stones, on trees, on butterflies, on clouds, on rivers, on fish, on eagles, and on you. Thank you so much for honoring us. Thank you for beautifying this place with your presence. If you have any questions about what we've talked about, or any of the forthcoming programs, please feel free to reach out to me. And in the meantime, may God bless you, illuminate you, and make your lives flourish.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Salam.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.